Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right, welcome everybody to this next episode of Revenue Rewired. We want to talk about what AI reveals about broken revenue systems. And Jay and I are really passionate and excited about our use of AI. In fact, Jay gives ChatGPT like a stroke by all the requests he puts through it. But, on a serious note, obviously it's kind of like, I think in some ways people are sick of talking about it, but it's not going to go away. And so I think it's how we're talking about it that is going to change the conversation. And in this episode, the term generative engine optimization is floating around quite a bit. And really what that means is how your business is showing up with AI tools. And those of us who use it a lot recognize it as what it is, which is a really powerful tool. But I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding around how to optimize that tool, how to start using it, especially when it comes to revenue generating systems and how to optimize your existing systems. And, it, I think in a perfect world, it amplifies the best of the best. But Jay, what we're finding with a couple of current clients is it's amplifying total garbage. And so why don't you share a little story about why AI has actually sped up, if anything, the garbage when it comes to revenue generating systems?
Yeah, and I think again, I would love if this story I'm going to share is going to help one business avoid quite a mess. And so I'm obviously not going to mention the company's name, but I think they'd be fine, with others learning from the mistake. And so I think the situation that happened here was, we had a client come to us maybe about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and they had hired another agency who was promoting themselves as kind of like an AI first agency, which obviously is kind of like the buzz thing now, which was really compelling. And the agency was also a marketing shop. And so what happened was that client was having a lot of issues this year with their campaigns that in the past had performed really well. And again, there was elements around it thinking that maybe it was just, tariffs or, the tough economic conditions that are going on. But the more they dissected it, something else felt amiss. And so they felt like there's so many different data points they had with different CRM systems and, and reporting systems and whatnot. And so they went to that agency and basically provided them all the various different data points. Agency then fed all of that information into, their custom GBT that does like marketing campaign optimization, and it spit out, a bunch of recommendations that on the surface level, even when we looked at it, wasn't bad, but they ran all the new campaigns with that kind of AI, you know, recommendations from ChatGPT and built it out. And 4 months later, not only was the campaign a significant disappointment and actually performed a lot worse than it did before, but also that created a lot more chaos internally and even more issues between their sales and marketing teams alignment. So they came to us and said, "Hey, with a fresh pair of eyes, we know you guys have extensive experience in marketing and sales and AI as a tool. Can you guys kind of look at the campaigns and figure out what is going on here to see if AI maybe had a bad recommendation?" And, again, I really appreciate how our team thinks. We took a step back and said, look, let's not focus on, it being the marketing agency's fault or the AI fault. Maybe there's something else going on. And so we dissected the process they used. And what we quickly found is that the agency, not really at their fault, but they just trusted the data from the client. The client gave them all this reporting. They just fed into their system, and their custom GBT they built out wasn't like a challenger mindset. So it then just took the data as being gospel accurate and made all these recommendations that again sounded good, and off they went. And 4 months later, realized it was a colossal failure. And that's really where I think it was a big aha for us, where is if you don't have clean data and also clarity internally around what you're trying to accomplish and your goals and objectives and the competitors and all the things, you can't blame the AI system. Well, in theory, you can't. But that's really where the problem all started. So I think that's really what got us our eyes wide open, that we've the value that I think we bring around the AI side is that we really push it to the nth degree, hopefully avoiding giving it a stroke, as Sarah pointed out earlier. But I think here it's like is really kind of being using your smarts and the human brain and really challenging stuff around first and last touch attribution and where the data is coming from and seasonality and competition and just all the things that an AI system is just not going to take the effort to ask you all these questions. So I think what we did then was we took their data, went back to the drawing board. We really posed all the questions, realized where they had some significant kinks in their system, especially around marketing source attribution. We basically got all the data to be a lot cleaner, and then kind of refed it back into our AI system, and it produced a lot. I feel like a lot stronger strategy to recommend back to that client. So that is really where I think, the essence of this show should be about is if people could take away that, if you don't have good data, garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. And just thinking that the AI thing is going to, solve world hunger, I think is a really, really bad way to think about it. Instead, you should be thinking about AI can amplify or multiply your efficiency only if your strategy, the data, and all the things that are accompanying that is clean and aligned with your company and your team.
Yeah, I mean that story is like so sad, but it's also becoming a lot more common too, I think. So there's a two-parter here, which is, and we'll share a couple of takeaways, which might sound simple in theory, but we know they're not. Obviously, these large organizations are finding that I think it's a double-edged sword, right? That AI is forcing faster failure. So
Hmm.
it forced the tanking of those campaigns, which then forced the conversation of what was fed into it to make it fail. And obviously, like maybe, 4 months is still a reasonable early learning period. However, there's a two-part failure system I think that maybe people aren't as aware of. One is what's being fed into the system by the company. And you and I are being approached in our client services team about our clients would love to be showing up for, AI search engines and how does their business get populated into all of this AI-ness of the world. Well, there's the piece of your business's data sets. And I think that's where we're not questioning very first and foremost, what are we feeding? Is that really true? And it does take time to pause whenever you're making some sort of adjustment like that. It really behooves you to take a moment and question everything. It's almost like, quarterly planning and biannual planning, which we've talked about, forces those conversations. Like, is this still working? Can we really take a hard look at this? Are we getting the results we expected? So that's like lesson number one, I'd say, is to your point, garbage in, garbage out. And AI amplifies the failure systems if it's garbage. But the other side of it is people don't recognize that the models have typically like an endpoint in their learning. So they're built up to a certain point or a time frame typically, and they're not often fed real-time information. Like some of the older models have an end date, right? So at some point you have to stop training the model, put it out into the world, and then now you're doing post-training. So not only do you have a model that is with every day decaying and becoming older and less current, you now have garbage data that you're putting into an old model. And so then it like exponentially amplifies the failures, which, is a great thing if you're going to learn from it, but it super sucks and it feels like it sets you back, right? So obviously, like chaos completely reveals itself if the first thing you don't have is clarity. Because AI is a tool, and I'm likening this to if you remember the days, again, I'll link back to my dad in his Peachtree days. We would sit in the same room in the basement, and
Did you
he
say
would have his,
Peachtree?
yeah, Peachtree
Like old
accounting
accounting
software.
software?
Yes. And
Wow.
he would sit behind me. We'd have be back to back, and he would do his business, work at night. And I was the oldest, so I had the old CDs of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Wow.
And so I would use those CDs to do my research and think about that versus being able to use Perplexity.
Mm.
Like the change of that. So I'm using old information, like even referencing books at some point is going to be harder to justify. But that's kind of what I feel like AI is like right now. Is people are treating it like it's current and this moment, but it's really more of an Encyclopedia Britannica CD in some cases.
I love that. I mean, I still laugh about the days where, you tell me how like you get a little aggressive with with ChatGPT where it tells you it
Is
can't
that the
do
best you
X.
can do? That's my
Yeah.
favorite prompt.
Yeah, and I'm reading how you respond to it. I'm like, you're scary. But like you're telling it like, yes, you can do it. And they're like, you're right, I can do that. And so I think to your point there that I think I want to make sure is super clear to our listeners is the AI platforms are extremely smart. But again, it there's an economic engine behind it. And it wants to get you the answers fast. But I think you have to do your due diligence, especially when you're you're leveraging its recommendations to not only impact the trajectory of your company that you're working at, but it also impacts like the staff, like the payroll. And I think if you're going to rely on it to make some really, really, really big decisions to try to, scale faster, I think you really need to take a step back and make sure that the data you're giving it is accurate, and the recommendations it's giving, just don't assume it's 100% correct. But I think to your point there, it's like the input you're relying on as being fact, I think is where I think you need to start with the question because there is a lot of misguided or unclear insights out there that obviously the systems have to rely on. So it obviously can get kind of scary, but I think it's super exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and I know we want to share a couple of tips on what it takes to optimize, for AI and your revenue engine using AI as a tool. And I'd say, back to your point, you mentioned attribution. That one is such a sticky, funny point
Hmm.
where I would say, like on the clear input side, which would probably be like number one tip, is what are you putting into the system in clear inputs? Maybe share a little bit about why attribution is such an interesting one to put into the clear inputs box and how hard that is. Like, we don't want to oversimplify, but we also don't want to discount that if you truly want to empower your business to be an AI forward and revenue generating, powered by AI type of business, it really takes a lot of work to kind of go back and make sure that you have the correct data that you need and that you're measuring the right stuff.
Yeah, and
So,
I think on that point, when you think about, I'm relating in my brain when you're talking about that, think about like, the scorecards or dashboards. And again, I think that you have to think about it both from the perspective of tracking both the revenue inputs, not just the outputs. And again, to be fair to the AI system, and this is where I think I waste way too much time on just seeing how far I can push it. But you can do your own testing and give it some data. Because again, Nick, if you say to the AI system, whatever one you use, ChatGPT or whatever, and you literally say to it, hey, here are the 10 different marketing sources that are generating results. You have a little table. And you're like, I don't know, let's say direct mail is the number one way we're getting leads, then it's going to come back to you and tell you you should do more direct mail. I think, even a human probably would do a similar thing. But I think to your point, Sarah, on the attribution side, where I think this is where I think the human part of it becomes so valuable. And this is where I think our team offers so much help is we have all this extensive experience to think about the customer journey, which obviously has changed so much over the years. And it's not this linear thing of like, I want to buy X. I'm going to go on Google and search on Y. I'm going to go to a website. I'm going to fill out a form and I'm going to buy it. There's so much of more of a linear, like a crazy roller coaster ride that happens. And so I think when we think about it, like, okay, a direct mail piece may have been the final attribution touch point that generated you the lead. But the things that happen from the first touch and everything in between, it offers significant value to create credibility and keeping you top of mind. And the AI system, unless you give it that correct prompt of like, I really want you to challenge this, it's just going to give you the answer that sounds on surface level as correct. And so that's where I think, the value of talking to like a consulting firm like us who has extensive experience in AI, we're going to apply that really smart human mind to it and think about the customer journey and really challenge the system. And so instead, that table, to make it super simple, it likely needs to think more about the customer journey, both the inputs and the outputs, as far as what's happening and what's working and what's not. So the system has kind of like a 180-degree perspective around your entire sales, marketing, and ops, goals and objectives. And that's where I think if you give the AI system that full, clear picture, it can do a much better job at not only telling you how to make some changes, but also how to optimize that engine. And that's where I think it's super exciting. But I always kind of push it back, being like, is it the best you can do? Here are things I'm concerned about. And you keep on pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And out of it likely will come gold. But if you just take the first answer and say, this is gospel, off I go, you might unfortunately be, sadly disappointed.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you kind of led into like our second tip, which was making sure there's alignment and you're focused on revenue. So, if you're taking a campaign that is underperforming and you're feeding it into GPT and you're like, hey, help me improve this campaign, you're taking a poor campaign without any insight into the system. And so it's not just the data that you're feeding it, but and everyone knows this, the prompting methodologies and engineering are the other half, which is the human side of things,
Hmm.
which I think can't be discounted. It really is being able to use our critical thinking and discernment skills, which is the other half of this whole success process with AI and why we're able to use it to our benefit, where you're not just asking, I think, for positive recommendations. You have to go, what in this has the opportunity to fail? And kind of ask it to work backwards. What is the worst part about this campaign, or whatever you're putting into the system? What could be improved? And don't just tell me what you think I want to hear. Because the system is, we joked about this, that the article came out about how much it costs ChatGPT for us to say please and thank you. And
I
it's
love
like,
that.
it's in it. I think it was, a little bit ago where it was being overly positive and everyone was like, stop like kissing my butt and telling me what I
Hmm.
want to hear. And so I think about these different models as individuals. Like they have a persona to me. Certain models are best for certain activities, but ultimately, if I were to give a human being this information, it's really just using the speed of the internet to create answers for me faster. So it's just really a super high powered research system. And the only way you get good research is by asking good questions. And so you can't get good answers if you don't know what it is you're asking. So that whole revenue focused strategy piece and having alignment across the organization, if all you're feeding it is campaign optimization prompts, well, that's what it's optimizing for. It's not actually optimizing for your revenue. And I don't know what you think about that and how organizations that have come to us asking for our advice and support on how to create AI optimized revenue generating systems understand the importance of having that alignment and how it feeds into the system and how it understands holistically. It keeps that in mind when it's answering the questions about individual departmental goals, for example.
I know I love where you're going with this, and I think again, and it's probably, agencies like us, not us, but agencies that are I think are causing some of these issues here around the whole buzzwords, like the whole generative engine optimization, like the GEO acronym. I think that, that is being thrown around a ton. I don't think half the people understand what it even means. But I think if you kind of simplify it, and that's what I love doing on behalf of our clients is just, keep it simple. The whole KISS thing. And I think, step number one is like, are you ready to be doing this kind of stuff? It's easy to say I want to grow my business from, you know, 50 million to 60 million or whatever you'd want to say. But end of the day, if your organization isn't even ready for this stuff, I think you're going to have a lot more chaos to your point, 10 minutes ago. And so obviously for me, I love thinking about things from a simple point of view as far as like the three A's. Like it's like create alignments, think about automation, and then, amplify or accelerate, however you want to think about it. And I loved your comment before about like asking questions. And that's the part I think we do a really good job. And by the way, if you are an executive leader at a business and you really want a fresh perspective, as hopefully you could sense, me and Sarah absolutely love talking with businesses about this stuff. Not a sales approach here, but if you're wondering how AI could be leveraged in your business to help scale your revenue systems, please reach out to us. Sarah will share at the end, an email you guys can use for that. But I wanted to maybe first mention that. But then second, for those that just want to, do this on their own, again, I think it's asking yourself and your team some really smart questions, almost like an audit, just to kind of start the conversation. And I'll just share a couple. And again, obviously, depending upon your business size and the season you are, in the business, your industry, obviously, that's where I think there is some nuances as far as other questions to ask. But I'm just going to share a few that I think could work across pretty much every organization. So one of the first ones that I love talking about, again, obviously we're very passionate about this whole alignment between sales and marketing departments. So, again, with that item, one of the biggest challenges that our clients often face is my marketing department has all these different goals and they're actually quite different, very tactical than what our sales team's goals are. So, for example, the marketing team might have a percentage of growth of traffic to their website, like a vanity metric. And then the sales team might have like a typical sales goal, like number of meetings being booked. Well, those things are in relation to each other, but there's a lot of steps in between. So I think one interesting questions you can ask yourself is, can the marketing reporter scorecard or whatever, or dashboard, or whatever you're using, can you have the sales qualified leads tied back to your marketing campaigns? This one, I think, relates heavily to that whole attribution side because it is amazing. Like, for example, we recently had a meeting with one of our clients, and they were the first to admit it, but we were looking through all their attribution for sources. One of the most popular sources they had was their website. And, I think the marketing team was kind of excited about that. But I asked a question without being condescending of how can a website be a marketing source? Like that's the conversion tactic. The marketing source needs to be like Google search or paid media or whatever it might be. They were like, oh my goodness. So clearly they had an issue where, they were crediting the website as being a marketing solution or a marketing source, and it's not. And so I think that question about the sales qualified leads tied back to campaigns, I think is a really interesting question because then you could think about closing the loop where sales teams can provide data back to marketing from a revenue input perspective to help the marketing team improve the campaigns. So that's a really big one. I think that can have a lot of interesting AI elements that can be applied to it. I think another question that I love talking about here is like, can the sales team like prioritize the leads based around fit, intent, and not just volume? So again, with that point, what I've noticed a lot is sales teams often focus heavily around the quantity. And so if they're expecting the marketing department to deliver, let's say, I don't know, 10 leads a week, the minute that they go to 8 leads a week, then the sales team blames the marketing team on why they aren't hitting their sales goals. And I know that quantity and volume is very important, but I think what's more important is how on the marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead conversation, where how are we scoring and prioritizing these leads based around fit and intent? And again, there when you feed the AI systems a clarity around your ideal client profile, the ICP, and then you feed it, hey, here are the last, 30 leads we got this last week, and help prioritize it because again, you want to make sure that you're tackling the biggest opportunities first, and then also going into those conversations with personalized approaches based around the person's need. And so I think that's where I think AI can offer a ton of value. And then last but not least, this is the one that I know our clients' leadership teams love, is like, what are the friction points or bottlenecks we have going on that's preventing us from hitting our revenue goals? But how can we look at that more from a real-time perspective? So again, I'll correlate that one to a recent call we had with another client where their data, unfortunately, is really messy. They've tried using AI to help gain insights on all of the data points. But again, because the data wasn't clear and or accurate, by the time they were able to get this data to be clean and understand it was too far in the future, almost like you're driving a car and looking in the rearview mirror and realize you just, passed the exit on the trip you're going on. And so I think here a lot of our clients are like, we need to find a way to have the dashboards or scorecards give us not only the insights or the information in real time, but also give us insights in real time so leadership can make adjustments. Is it a process problem, a product problem or service? Is it a resource problem? I mean, there's so many different elements in place that are causing bottlenecks or friction. And so this is where I think AI is absolutely amazing with the various systems that we've used, where again, if the data is accurate and you're presenting it in the right way, that's meaningful, then the AI tools, if it understands your business and your ideal clients and their pain points and motivations and needs, it can spit out in real time most amazing insights. And then from an automation acceleration perspective, as long as your leadership team and your various marketing and sales and ops resources are aligned around that, you can do some really amazing things to reduce the bottlenecks and accelerate your revenue goals. So again, those are just three things. Again, marketing report, sales qualified leads back to campaigns, prioritization around the leads based around fit and intent, and then last but not least is how do you see the data in real time that you can trust?
Hmm. Well, one key point you mentioned though is the closed loop system because I use like a mini persona. I think about ChatGPT like an intern, for example, and its only job is to take the information I'm giving it and to do something with it. Well, I'm not really helping myself by not giving it the results of a recommendation it gave, for example. So you have to feed it pre and post. And I think most people think about it as a pre system where I give it information, it gives me something back, and then that's the end of it. And then you continue going back, I give it information, it gives me something back. But you're never going and closing the loop. I mean, I don't say never as in never ever.
Hmm.
We do this because we've learned you have to tell it how things went in order for it to then adjust the future. And it is a lot of work to use AI in the right way, but it definitely, once you start investing, just like a business owner or a leader delegating to someone, the compound experience and investment in training those people or those tools or those systems pays off. Just like taking the time to clean your data, taking the time to like go back and audit your campaigns, all of that work helps you avoid those future failures that really cost you a lot of time and money, which ultimately is slowing your revenue engine down.
I love that. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that's probably can kind of wrap up on that point. But I've already mentioned this like a zillion times. But I guess to kind of frame it up a little differently is that, and this is what I love having chats about with current and prospective clients is that there is this assumption that AI is going to create the clarity, and it can, but if the if the information, again, the garbage in garbage out, isn't clear, it's just going to magnify the wrong things. And so I think if you could think about it from the revenue engine perspective, similar again with your car, if you don't do an oil change, and I wish my daughters would finally understand how important that is. Eventually, that engine will seize up, and it's going to be a lot more expensive to have to replace it. And so, if you build your revenue engine from a keeping it clean, it's really tight, and most importantly, aligned with your team. I really do feel like AI is the most amazing tool that we've had, in my marketing and sales career over the last 25 years that I think is not like it doesn't become like your like growth force. It's like, or sorry, it becomes like a growth force, not like your like chaos, like an amplifier. And again, I just really wish people would just take a step back and think about how to create clarity. And because if you feed it the right stuff, AI will become the most amazing tool for your marketing and sales team.
Yeah, and then the cool thing is by doing all this, you really set your business up in the future to use it to scale on a very personalized level, which is where you can create your own systems within your business using AI that is very custom because right now it's just very generic. It's
Yep.
pulling from everyone else's stuff. Well, eventually you're going to want it to be customized to your particular niche, business, focus, etc. And in order to do that, you have to do the work now. So obviously, we know how much work it takes, and we love helping out. So AI is very fun for us to play with. And, email us at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com if you want to pick our brains because we just like talking to other people about how they're using it. It's really like created a very cool community in the marketing and sales space. So, well, thanks, Jay. I think this was an awesome episode.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.